The last thing my daughter-in-law ever said to me before shutting me out of their lives was, "She's not even your real grandmother." Those words still echo in my mind like broken glass. I can still see my 8-year-old grandson's face twisting in confusion before turning cold. He pushed away the birthday gift I'd spent weeks choosing, a handmade wooden train set, and ran upstairs. That was the last time I saw him for 7 years. But what hurt most wasn't the rejection. It was realizing how easily love could be rewritten by lies. My name is Velma Patterson. I raised my son Tom alone after my husband died in a construction accident when Tom was only 6. I cleaned offices at night, worked retail during the day, and did clothing alterations on weekends. My back bent, my fingers bled, but I never complained. Every sacrifice was for him. When he wanted to play baseball, I found a way to pay for the fees. When he needed tutoring, I stayed up until 2 a.m., helping him with homework before heading to work at 6 a.m. I believed love and effort would be enough to raise a good man. For a while, it seemed to be. Tom grew up, got a steady job, married a woman named Melanie, and soon had a son, my little Elliot. I thought life was finally kind. I became the kind of grandmother who baked cookies, babysat whenever they needed, and told bedtime stories until he fell asleep in my lap. Every time he called out Grandma Velma and ran into my arms, I felt like every hardship had been worth it. But Melanie never looked at me with warmth. Her smiles were tight, her tone polite, but cold. She'd say things like, "You don't need to come over so often, Velma, or call before dropping by next time." I brushed it off as new wife boundaries. I didn't realize she was quietly building a wall between me and my grandson, brick by careful brick. The day it all shattered was Elliot's 8th birthday. I came early to help decorate and brought his gift, that wooden train set I'd saved up for. As I stepped inside the kitchen, I heard Melanie on the phone saying, "She acts like she's more important than his real parents. She's not even his real grandmother." My heart froze. When she saw me standing there, she didn't apologize. She called Elliot into the room and, smiling sweetly, told him right in front of me, "Sweetheart, Grandma Velma isn't really your grandma. Grandma Susan, my mom, is your real one." I watched confusion cloud his little face as he whispered, "I don't want you here, fake grandma." Tom walked in just as I bent to pick up the gift that had fallen. I waited for him to defend me, but he only said quietly, "Maybe you should go, Mom. Give us space." That was the last time I saw them. The first year after, I cried more than I had since my husband's death. Every morning I'd wake up thinking of calling them before remembering I wasn't welcome. But grief eventually hardened into determination. I was still working at Henderson's cleaning service, 15 years scrubbing floors for someone else. When the owner mentioned she was thinking of selling, I asked the price. $200,000. I barely had $3,000 saved, but I had something more powerful, nothing left to lose. I spent 6 months studying business management at night, learning about loans and bookkeeping. I built a plan and marched into a bank with spreadsheets, profit projections, and a promise I'd work without salary for 2 years, reinvesting every penny. Against all odds, they approved it. I bought the company, renamed it Patterson Cleaning Services, and worked 18-hour days cleaning by day, managing by night. My hands cracked from bleach, but my will never wavered. When exhaustion hit, I imagined Elliot, his laugh, his tiny hands reaching for mine, and kept going. Within 3 years, I'd doubled profits. By year 5, I owned several small service companies, cleaning, landscaping, and maintenance under one umbrella. People began calling me Mrs. Patterson with respect in their tone, but success is lonely when there's no one to share it with. The house was quiet, my phone silent. Through whispers from mutual friends, I heard that Tom's career had stalled and that Melanie no longer worked. They were struggling. 7 years after that birthday party, on an ordinary Tuesday at 2:47 p.m., my doorbell rang. On the monitor, I saw them, Tom pale and tired, Melanie clutching a worn designer purse, and a lanky teenage boy with dark hair and familiar eyes. Elliot. My pulse raced. For a long moment, I just watched. Then I opened the door. "Mom," Tom said, voice trembling. "We were wondering if we could talk. Maybe stay here for a while." Melanie added brightly, "You have so much space, Velma. We'd be out of your way." I looked at their suitcases, their strained smiles, the quiet desperation beneath their words. "Come in," I said. They stepped into the marble foyer, their eyes wide at the chandelier, the sweeping staircase, the silent proof of what I'd built without them. Over coffee in the living room, Tom explained he'd lost his job 3 months earlier and the bank was threatening foreclosure. "Just until I find something new," he said. Melanie chimed in. "Of course we'll help out around the house." I met their hopeful eyes calmly. "You can stay," I said, "but there will be conditions." Their smiles faltered. "This is my house. You'll follow my rules. Everyone contributes. No exceptions." They nodded eagerly, relief flooding their faces. I almost felt sorry for them almost. That night, as I lay awake in my quiet mansion, I thought of the woman I used to be, the one who begged for their love, who measured her worth by their approval. She was gone. The new Velma Patterson didn't beg. She built empires. And this was just the beginning of what I planned to teach them. At 5:30 a.m., my house was the kind of quiet that lets you hear your own breath. I finished my stretches in the home gym, showered, and by 6:15 a.m., I was at my desk reading overnight reports from the landscaping division and signing off on a maintenance bid for a corporate campus. The old Velma would have been halfway to her second job by then, praying the bus arrived on time. The new Velma reviewed cash flow-approved hiring and sipped dark roast from a porcelain cup. At 7 a.m., Maria arrived, steady as sunrise. I asked her to lay 3 extra place settings and to prepare a simple breakfast. Also, I said, "Please be ready to train my daughter-in-law today." Maria's eyebrow twitched once. "Thoroughly," I added. She nodded, professional as ever, though her eyes flicked to the ceiling as if she could already hear trouble stirring. Tom shuffled into the kitchen at 7:45 a.m., as wrinkled as the clothes he'd slept in. He tried a smile that couldn't hold. I poured him coffee and told him breakfast would be served at 8 a.m. sharp. He hovered with the anxious energy of a man whose problems have finally outrun his excuses. "Mom." "I'm grateful," he said, fingers tight around the mug. "I'll make it right." I didn't reassure him. Life had spent too long doing that for him. "You'll meet Jose at 9 a.m. by the pool house," I said. "He'll give you your assignments." Melanie drifted in 2 minutes before 8 a.m., wrapped in a silk robe that had seen brighter days, perfume trailing like a plea. She made a show of admiring the stove, the marble, the view, anything but the line of expectation in my face. When Elliot slouched in at exactly 8 a.m., he took in the table with 3 forks and a linen napkin as if we'd set a riddle. I explained what each piece was for. He looked at his mother, waiting for a cue, then back at me. "Yes, ma'am," he said, trying the words on like a jacket that might fit. We ate quietly, the weight of our arrangement settling like fine dust. After breakfast, I laid out the day as if it were a business plan. Tom to the pool house for grounds work, Elliot to learn alongside him until lunchtime, Melanie to the laundry room with Maria for detailed instruction. "Everyone contributes," I said. "That's not punishment. It's belonging." Tom opened his mouth to protest, then closed it with a swallow that looked painful. I watched him from my office at 9:30 a.m. as Jose showed him how to handle the skimmer, how to balance chemicals, how to respect tools that don't care for pride. By 10:45 a.m., sweat had darkened his collar and blistered his soft hands. Pride and blisters are both teachers, I thought. Meanwhile, a raised voice echoed from the back hallway. I stepped into the laundry room to find Melanie blinking at a heap of pink linens that used to be white. Maria stood steady beside her, explaining sorting and temperature with the patience of a person who treats every towel as a promise kept. "I must have misunderstood," Melanie said, voice tight. "You didn't listen," I corrected. "The replacements will come from your ledger. Since you have no income, you'll work off the debt." Maria started again from step 1. I left them to it and went to the pool where Elliot sat with grass flecks on his jeans, watching the water ripple in slow circles. Up close, the teenager's armor looked flimsy bravado, stitched with doubt, a seam of hope running crooked under the surface. I asked if he wanted to hear what his father was like at 15. He shrugged yes without saying it. I told him about Tom's doomed baseball phase, about Sarah Mitchell, about the black eye that led to a kitchen full of chocolate chip cookies because I taught his father to pivot, from striking out to measuring flour. "Dad can bake?" he asked, skeptical but curious. He used to calm his nerves with vanilla and brown sugar, I said, and watched Elliot file that away like a clue he might use later. He asked me what really happened on his 8th birthday. I didn't spare him the truth, but I spared him the malice. "Your mother was afraid," I said. "Afraid of losing importance. Fear dressed itself up as certainty and marched you away from me." His eyes shone, and he looked at the water like it might blink first. "I was a kid," he said, a confession and a defense in one breath. "You were a child who trusted your parents," I said. "That's not a crime. It's a covenant." He breathed out, and something inside him softened like a knot learning how to loosen. Inside, at 12:10 p.m., voices spiked. Tom stormed out, Melanie right behind him, hair-frayed pride. More so. "This is humiliating," Tom said. "We came for help, not to be punished." I kept my seat. Elliot stayed beside me, knuckles pale on the chair arms, listening like someone who's tired of being left out of the unspoken. "Accountability isn't punishment," I said. "It's the currency of adults." I asked Tom how many times he'd called me in 7 years. He looked away. "None." I didn't gloat. I measured. "You left me outside your life, and now you've let your life leave you outside it." Melanie tried charm, then reason, then anger, cycling through tactics that had probably worked everywhere else. I let each one pass like weather and then set the terms that mattered. I offered Tom an entry-level position at Patterson Services. Begin with maintenance management. Learn from the ground up a starting salary of $60,000 with performance bonuses and full benefits on the condition that he accept counseling, both marriage and individual. The number knocked the wind from him. The conditions steadied it back in. To Melanie, I offered a forked path: take an entry-level role, learn real work, or sign a non-disclosure agreement in exchange for a lump sum of $50,000, with clauses forbidding interference with my relationship to Elliot and requiring a public correction of the lies she had told. She paled at the clauses, not the money. Elliot lifted his head and asked the only question that mattered. "What about me?" I told him he always had a choice to spend time with me, to live here, if he wished to decide the kind of man he wanted to become, and then live that decision in daylight. He looked older than 15 for a heartbeat, and then very young, which is what honesty does to the face. "Can I think about it?" he asked. "Take all the time you need," I said, and meant it. We sat in the hush that comes after a challenge lands. Outside, Jose kept working. Inside, a clock ticked like a metronome for courage. Tom stared at the contract as if it were written in the one language he'd never learned, his own backbone. "I don't know if I'm strong enough," he whispered. "You are," I said. "Strength isn't thunder. It's a door you open every morning." At 1 p.m., the sun sharpened on the water, and for the first time since 2:47 p.m. the day before, I felt the balance of our house tilt towards something like truth. For the next few days, the house pulsed with a strange new rhythm, quiet discipline wrapped around uneasy gratitude. Tom woke at 6:30 a.m., without prompting his steps, dragging toward the pool house where Jose waited. By mid-morning, his shirt would be damp, his hands roughening his pride, dissolving like salt in water. At lunch, he'd sit straighter, less ashamed, more determined. I watched it happen from my office window, saying nothing because transformation is shy. It hides when you stare directly at it. Melanie lasted less gracefully. The first week was marked by sighs, broken nails, and a perfume of resentment. Yet Maria, ever patient, taught her everything from folding sheets so their corners aligned to scrubbing floors until they gleamed. Every failure was a lesson, every complaint a mirror. By the end of that week, Melanie had lost her theatrical tone and begun to listen when spoken to. There was humility forming where vanity used to live, though she fought it like a fever she didn't want to break. Elliot adapted fastest. He shadowed Tom in the mornings and helped Maria in the afternoons, curious and sharp. He asked questions about my businesses, about how I'd built them, about what profit margins and equity meant. I told him everything he wanted to know. At dinner, he'd share what he learned, and though Tom looked embarrassed, I saw a spark in his eyes too, a mix of pride and regret. Maybe the awareness that his mother was now teaching his son what he himself had never cared to ask. One evening, as the sky folded into deep violet, Elliot joined me in the study. "Grandma," he said quietly. No hesitation this time. "Can I stay in the guest room next to yours? Mom and Dad argue a lot, and I feel like I can actually breathe here." My throat tightened, but I managed to keep my tone even. "Of course you can." When he left to pack his things, I sat in silence for a long time, letting the sound of my heartbeat settle into something softer than victory. By the second week, Tom approached me after breakfast, sweat still drying on his forehead. "Mom, about the job offer," he said, his voice steadier. "I want to take it." I saw the weight of the choice in his shoulders, the decision to swallow pride for the sake of rebuilding. I nodded. "Then we'll start you next Monday. You'll report to my operations director in the downtown office, not to me. You'll earn every raise by performance, not by bloodline." He met my eyes and said, "That's fair." Melanie, meanwhile, had been quieter. Her designer clothes were replaced by plain jeans and cotton shirts. Her manicured hands were now steady on a mop handle, her posture less brittle. But one afternoon, I found her standing in the hallway, holding the non-disclosure contract I'd given her. "I've read this over and over," she said. "You're asking me to admit everything I did to everyone." Her voice trembled. "It'll destroy my reputation." "Reputation built on lies deserves destruction," I said gently. "What rises after will be real." She looked at me for a long moment, and for once her face showed no pretense, just exhaustion and a flicker of truth. "I'll sign it," she said finally. "Not because of the money, because I can't live like this anymore." I nodded. "Then make it mean something." She did. That evening, she gathered Tom and Elliot in the living room and spoke the truth aloud. She admitted she'd turned them against me out of insecurity, that she'd been cruel, that she'd tried to erase me because she couldn't bear sharing love she didn't control. Her voice shook, but she didn't stop. Tom wept quietly beside her, and Elliot reached for my hand without taking his eyes off his mother. When she finished, I didn't offer applause. I simply said, "Thank you." After that, the air in the house changed. The tension eased, replaced by something tentative but real. Tom began his new job the following week, showing up at 8 a.m. sharp in a borrowed suit. The first day, my operations director called to say, "He's raw, but he listens." That's more than I expected. I smiled. Listening is the first currency of success. Melanie, freed from performance, began to help Maria by choice instead of duty. I caught them laughing one morning over a stubborn stain, the sound light and unguarded. Later, Maria pulled me aside and whispered, "She's learning Mrs. Patterson, slowly but sincerely." I believed her. As for Elliot, he blossomed. He filled the quiet rooms with questions, with ideas, with the easy laughter of a teenager rediscovering family. We'd sit by the pool in the evenings, and he'd tell me about his debate club or how he wanted to learn business one day. "Maybe I can work for Patterson Services, too," he said one night, grinning. "Start from the bottom like Dad." I laughed. That's the only place worth starting from. 3 months later, the house was unrecognizable, not in its structure, but in its heartbeat. Mornings hummed with movement instead of silence. Tom came home from work tired but content, talking about contracts and team meetings. Melanie cooked dinner twice a week, her first edible meals, each one greeted like a miracle, and Elliot's laughter bounced down the hallways like music. One Thursday afternoon, I stood in the kitchen baking cookies, the same recipe I'd once taught Tom when he was 15, and heartbroken over a girl named Sarah Mitchell. The smell of vanilla and brown sugar drifted through the house. Maria walked in and stopped short, smiling wide. "You're cooking, Mrs. Patterson." I nodded. "My grandson has friends coming after school." Her smile softened. "The house feels alive again." I looked around and realized she was right. For years, I'd built wealth and walls to protect myself from loneliness, and all it took to fill the emptiness was truth, hard work, and forgiveness, the three things money could never buy. When the doorbell rang at 4 p.m., Elliot's friends tumbled in, laughter echoing off the marble floors. I wiped my hands on my apron, heart swelling with quiet joy. From the study doorway, Tom watched his son and smiled. Melanie stood beside him, her hand resting gently on his arm. For the first time, the love between them looked real, fragile, but true. I realized then that this mansion, once just a symbol of revenge and triumph, had finally become what I'd dreamed of all along, a home. Life, I've learned, isn't about who walks away when you fall. It's about who chooses to return when they're ready to stand beside you again. And sometimes forgiveness isn't weakness. It's the final proof of strength. If this story moved you, remember to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that remind us what truly matters, and comment where you're watching from. I'd love to know how far this story reaches.